Linda Slayton was born on March 8, 1950. By the time she was 16, she was pregnant with her first son, Jeff Slayton. 3 years later, she gave birth to a second son, Tim Slayton. Soon after, she managed to convince the father of her 2 sons, Frank Slayton, to get married so they could start a proper family. However, a happy family was far from what she thought. Frank turned out to be an abusive husband who would routinely abuse her and the 2 kids. Plagued by his alcoholism and addiction, he would turn violent whenever he got drunk. Jeff and Tim recall that their father would often turn into a monster. He was a violent alcoholic and would beat the 3 of them without any conscience. The thought of filing for divorce soon ran through Linda's mind, and in 1974, Linda Slayton finally became free. She divorced Frank Slayton after 9 volatile years of their marriage. Linda started her new life as a single mom with 2 teenage sons. She tried her best to provide for her family and be there for her sons as a caring mother, juggling work and chores. It was obvious that she had limited financial capabilities. They didn't have a car, so her sons would often go to school either by walking or by sharing rides if they were offered one. Apart from school, Jeff and Tim loved playing football, but since they didn't have a ride to football practice, their coach, Coach Joseph, would often pick them up and drop them off at or nearby their home. A week before the 4th of September, Linda was preparing her home to welcome her mother. She wanted her mother to move in since she thought her presence in the house would help get it in order and make it more homely. Her sister Judy would also often come by to visit her. During her visits, the sisters would spend their time together over a hot cup of coffee. On the 3rd of September 1981, Jeff Slayton came home from football practice, but when he found nothing to eat at home, he headed over to his grandparents' place. Later, at about 9:30 p.m., Jeff returned home only to find the house empty. Around 11:30 p.m., Linda and Tim, her younger son, came home. She mentioned going to a neighbor's place to play a game of cards, but before that Jeff saw his mom doing the dishes. Tim, on the other hand, went to sleep. Around this time, her son Jeff came up to her and apologized since the 2 had fought earlier that day. As they made up, Linda said goodnight to her boys. Jeff remembers saying these words, "I love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow." Little did he know those would be the last words he would say to her. On September 4th, 1981, around 8:30 a.m., Judy arrived at Linda's apartment. She went up to Linda's room and knocked on the door twice. There was no answer. She thought Linda might still be in bed, but it was unusual as Linda usually woke up before the boys left for school. As she made her way out of the house, she noticed something strange. The window in Linda's room had a missing something, and on top of that, the window was wide open. Judy returned to Linda's room, knocked again, and this time opened the door to find Linda's lifeless body. She screamed, which caught the attention of a neighbor near the house, and he immediately called 911. Linda was found dead with a wire-clothed hanger around her neck. Her body was partially naked, and she lay right across the bed with her head down on the floor. There were no signs of struggle. Her cupboard was wide open, and apart from that, all the other things in the room were in their usual places. Within a matter of minutes, the Lakeland police, news reporters, and medical services all arrived. The yellow sign was plastered all over Linda's home. Tim and Jeff were both awakened by police officers and were asked to leave their home, which was now a crime scene. While Jeff was able to get past his mother's room without seeing her lifeless body, Tim saw his mother one last time, but this time she wasn't alive. The 2 were then sent to live with their grandparents pending further investigation. After her sons were sent to stay with their grandparents, Sergeant Edgar Pickett from the Lakeland Police Department arrived at the crime scene. He led the investigation and discovered important evidence. Initially, Sergeant Edgar found several fingerprints in Linda's bedroom. While most of the prints matched Linda, one palm print was different. This palm print was located on the windowsill of Linda's bedroom, which was missing a window sheet. To uncover the truth about Linda's death, an autopsy was performed. The examination revealed multiple bruises and marks on her arms, shoulders, and neck. Additionally, her body was found partially naked, suggesting a possible sexual assault. The autopsy concluded that she had first been brutally beaten, then sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled with a metal clothes hanger from her own home. Among the evidence collected, a palm print was the most important, as it could directly identify the perpetrator if matched. However, at the time, forensic DNA analysis was not available. As a result, the police had to thoroughly investigate her entire family tree to identify potential suspects. The first suspect was Frank Sladen, Linda's ex-husband. When Linda divorced Frank in 1975, she described him as aggressive and abusive, neglecting his family. This made him a key person of interest in the case. He was questioned by police, but they discovered that he was at home in Alabama on the night Linda was killed. Despite this alibi, they continued to have suspicions about him. The second suspect was Linda's son, Jeff. Authorities considered him a suspect because he had a heated argument with his mother shortly before her death. Jeff had a complex relationship with Linda. As the eldest son, he felt the weight of growing up in a household with an abusive father and later with a single mother. Although they sometimes clashed, Jeff always tried to reconcile. On the night of the murder, he and Linda had made up before he went to bed. The police interrogated him about the incident and asked him to take 2 polygraph tests. After he passed both tests, the police cleared him as a suspect. The third suspect was Linda's boyfriend at the time of her murder. Linda, a single mother, had recently started dating a white male whose name has not been disclosed. He had a good relationship with Linda and her children. However, after the police conducted a background check and polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. By this point, the investigation was running low on leads. In September 2001, nearly a year after Linda's murder, they received a tip about a 24-year-old man named Jimmy Omer was rumored to have committed a similar crime. At that time, he was connected to an incident in which he pulled a 10-year-old girl through her bedroom window and nearly killed her. The similarities between his crimes and Linda's case led the police to consider him the main suspect. Unfortunately, Jimmy died before the investigation could take place, which meant they couldn't get a DNA match without exhuming his body. Fortunately, his mother agreed to a DNA test and provided a sample. However, the results showed no match. If not for Jimmy's family or the convict next door, who could have killed Linda? As time passed, days turned into weeks and then months. In Lakeland, detectives explored other suspects, but no one was charged and the lack of new leads caused the case to go cold. The Slayton brothers faced a difficult new reality. Their mother was gone, leaving only their grandparents, Clarence and Margaret Harris, to care for them. While the investigation proceeded, Linda's parents and sons held her funeral, after which they gradually began to resume their normal lives. The brothers returned to school, and as time went on, they started to heal from the events at 303 North Brunel Parkway. Tim resumed playing football and fondly remembers how supportive his teammates and coach were, especially when he didn't have a ride home. Coach Joseph consistently drove him to and from practice. A month later, Tim hung a photograph of his team on his bedroom wall, and that picture became a source of motivation for him to move forward. In the years after their mother's death, the young brothers matured into men who cherished their own families. Jeff married and had 2 children, while Tim also started a family. Over time, both brothers regularly contacted the investigators to inquire about the progress of their mother's case. Although Jeff and Tim had built successful lives for themselves, they remained committed to ensuring the investigation progressed. 17 years after Linda's death, the police continued their investigation. By 1998, Sergeant Edgar Pickett had retired, and Linda's Slayton case was handed over to a new team, with Detective Brad Grace taking on the case. While reviewing the evidence, he discovered unidentified DNA from the Linda case that had been collected in 1981. He sent this DNA to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Major Crime Lab, known as the FDLE. By 1999, the FDLE Crime Lab successfully developed a complete DNA profile of Linda Slayton's unknown killer. After obtaining the DNA profile, he revisited the list of suspects, determined to collect DNA samples from each of them. It was now 2001, and Detective Brad was confident that the DNA match would identify the murderer. He made it a priority to speak with the Slayton brothers first and soon arranged a meeting with them. When the brothers arrived, Detective Brad collected their DNA samples and sent them for testing. The results showed no match, which completely cleared Jeff's name from the case. Next, the investigation focused on Frank Slayton. By this time, Frank had stopped drinking and seemed to have lost some of his aggressive and abusive behavior following Linda's death. During this period, Tim and Jeff were also able to reconnect with their father and heal some past wounds. Frank agreed to provide his DNA for testing, but it did not match the unidentified DNA profile that Detective Brad believed belonged to the murderer. In 2005, Detective Brad submitted the unidentified DNA profile from Linda case to the FBI's National DNA Database, where it was regularly compared with new DNA samples. Throughout his investigation, he eliminated dozens of suspects using DNA evidence. However, he retired in 2015 after dedicating 17 years to the Linda Slayton. After Detective Grace, Linda case was handed over to new detectives Tommy Hathcock and Russell Hurley. 3 years into the investigation, Detective Tommy discovered that the FDLE had developed an innovative technology to identify previously unidentifiable DNA. Seizing this opportunity, he sent the unidentified DNA from Linda case to Cece, a genetic genealogist with the FDLE. Cece uploaded the DNA to a public genealogy website she manages, which generated a list of individuals related to the unidentified killer. She then gathered information from birth and marriage certificates, obituaries, and social media to construct a genetic family tree. As the investigation progressed, Cece developed 3 branches of the family tree for the suspect, ultimately pinpointing the individual most likely responsible for Linda's murder. The DNA profile strongly indicated that he was indeed the murderer. The situation took a surprising turn that even shocked Tim and Jeff. The photo hanging on Tim's bedroom wall featured Joseph, commonly known as Coach Joseph, standing just above his shoulder. After learning the killer's identity, Detective Tommy and Russell investigated Joseph's background. They found a history of crimes, including grand theft through forgery of a will. Although he was never formally charged, the police had collected his palm and fingerprints. You may remember that Sergeant Edgar Pickett found a palm print on the windowsill at the crime scene. This discovery brought hope that the family of the deceased could finally find closure in a cold case that had remained unsolved for over 40 years. Investigators compared the palm prints taken from Linda's windowsill in 1981 with Joseph's palm print and found a match. However, they still needed to compare a recent DNA sample from Joseph with the DNA from Linda case. They decided to obtain his DNA for testing without his knowledge. The investigators took garbage bags from Joseph's house and examined them at the police station for potential DNA evidence. Among the items, they discovered a piece of medical adhesive tape, which they sent to the crime lab for analysis. While waiting for the DNA results, the detectives further explored Joseph's personal life. He had lived in Kathleen, Florida for most of his 58 years, just 30 minutes from the crime scene. Joseph had children and grandchildren, and they also got married. After nearly 2 weeks, the crime lab results confirmed that the unknown DNA found matched Joseph's DNA on the medical adhesive tape. Consequently, in December 2019, detectives arrested Joseph and brought him in for questioning. In 1981, Joseph was around 20 years old when he committed a crime. The day after the murder, the police spoke to him over the phone. During this brief call, Joseph claimed he had dropped him off after football practice on September 3, 1981, the night before the murder. Despite this, the police did not consider him a suspect at the time. Joseph also told investigators that Linda had invited him over for consensual sex, but the detectives knew this was not true. They suspected that Joseph had been targeting Linda prior to the murder because he frequently picked up Tim for football practice and dropped him off at his home afterward. Additionally, Joseph lived nearby, which raised further suspicion. On the night of September 3, 1981, Joseph dropped Tim off at his house after football practice. Later that evening, when no one was home, he returned to the house and broke in through Linda's bedroom window. He hid in her closet and waited for her to go to bed. Once she was asleep, he attacked her, sexually assaulted her, and ultimately strangled her with a wire hanger from the closet. Joseph pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and sexual battery. During his sentencing, Linda Slayton's family confronted him, asking why he killed her. One family member expressed their pain, saying, "I just want to know why. Why did you take my mom away?" Joseph only replied, "I am a good person," and did not apologize or explain his actions. The judge sentenced Joseph to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the Slayton brothers find some comfort in knowing that Joseph will never be released from prison, they are furious that he enjoyed years of freedom while they grew up without their mother. For Tim, this realization was shocking, especially since Coach Joseph was a role model for him. He recalls that Joseph would often inquire about the case, asking if there had been any updates on finding the culprit. To stay under the radar, Joseph offered his assistance, making things easier for the boys during football practice. He'd ask us how the case was going. He wasn't probing for details, just wanting to know if there was any new information or leads. And I would say, no, nothing. Even now, Tim struggles to accept that the person he trusted most could be his mother's killer. He reflects, "I've had the killer's picture on my table at home all this time and never realized it." Jeff, who is still grieving, often wonders what life would have been like if Linda were still alive. Tim and Jeff have stayed very close after the incident. They often visit their mother's grave, and on the anniversary of her death, Jeff always lights a candle. Despite everything they've been through, they continue to live life to the fullest in her memory. April 12, 2014. Around 10 a.m. police receive a disturbing phone call from a man at a home in the city of Pleasant Grove, Utah. Pleasant Grove is around 35 miles away from Salt Lake City and is home to around 38,000 people. The house in question is a fairly new-built 3-bedroomed home on a quiet and unsuspecting street. The front garden is strewn with various bits and pieces, and a single ornament hangs over the front door. Darren West had just been released from prison on a drugs-related charge and had gone back to his former house to sort the garage out and gather his belongings. He used to share the home with his now ex-wife, 39-year-old Megan Huntsman, and their 3 children, 11-year-old Sawyer, 17-year-old JC, and Darian, who had just turned 18. In 2005, Darren had pleaded guilty in federal court to 2 counts of possessing chemicals intended to be used in manufacturing methamphetamine. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but he maintained his innocence the entire time. The house in question was owned by his parents. Megan had also ended up leaving the home in 2011 at Darren's parents' request, when they found out that she had been having an affair. Hers and Darren's daughters continued to live in the house with another relative taking care of them. Megan moved around for a while, spending time living with her mother in West Valley City, before moving in with her boyfriend Jimmy and Meadowwood Village Mobile Home Park. Megan's mother described her daughter as very quiet, someone that kept to herself. She said she always struggled with mental health issues, but never wanted to ask for help and rarely shared anything about her life, keeping secrets about a lot of things. Megan and Darren had met in high school, and Megan would soon fall pregnant with their first child. She eventually moved out at the age of 18, and she and Darren got married before having their second daughter a little over a year later. Down the line, things started to spiral for Megan and Darren. They became addicted to methamphetamine, and this completely consumed Megan's life for years. People that knew Megan said that the mother of 2 was suffering badly from depression, was losing jobs because of her addiction, and the marriage between her and Darren was becoming violent because of the drugs. When she finally stopped using meth, she turned to alcohol, becoming heavily dependent on that instead. Her drinking became even worse when in 2012, her father took his own life. As 2014 rolled around, Darren and Megan had long been split up and were now virtually estranged. Darren was back at the house with a few of the people to help him sort through his things. Whilst moving stuff out of the garage, he noticed a strong odor, something that smelled like chemicals emitting from one of the cardboard boxes. The box read, "Baby stuff, Megan's." It was tightly sealed with electrical tape. Once pulled off, he made a gruesome and horrifying discovery. He found the corpse of a baby wrapped up inside a plastic bag. The only person he could think of was Megan. He phoned her immediately, and she made a shocking admission. She said that the baby was hers and Darren's, and that she had given birth when he was in prison. The baby had been stillborn, and out of fear and panic, she had wrapped it up and hidden it, scared about calling someone or going to a hospital. Darren was shaken and immediately phoned authorities. They received an order to conduct a thorough investigation of the house. Pleasant Grove police quickly arrived at the property and the home was swiftly taped off. As police were searching the garage, they found some bloody leather gloves too. Already a very disturbing scene, officers arrived at the mobile home park. Megan's boyfriend had just returned to find police cars surrounding his home, and officers said that they needed to take Megan in for questioning. One of her neighbors, a man named Mr. Brady, recalled that upon hearing the police had found the baby's body, Megan had gone to him and begged him for a gun. Whilst at the station, Megan told police the same story that she had told Darren. The baby in the box was her child, and when she realized they had been a stillborn, she panicked and didn't know what else to do. But as the search of the property carried on, to the officers' horror and shock, they came face to face with so much more than anyone could have imagined. 6 more babies were found, wrapped up in either towels, shirts, or plastic bags, and then placed inside various boxes. Captain Michael Roberts described the scene as emotionally draining and hugely upsetting to the investigators. One detective said, "The tiny bodies were sent to the medical examiner's office for testing, one of which was to determine the cause of death and also determine a DNA match. Just days after the heartbreaking scene was discovered, an arrest was made that would leave the neighborhood in disbelief." Megan Huntsman was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder and was now on suicide watch in Utah County Jail. A devastating secret that had been kept under wraps for what would turn out to be 18 years was finally out in the open. All of the children found in the garage were confirmed to be Megan's. One of the babies had been a stillborn, but the other 6 had either been suffocated or strangled. There were 5 girls and 2 boys. They determined that her poor babies could have only been alive for a matter of minutes before they were killed. Are still investigating the motives to find out why this happened. How this could have happened, said Police Chief Mike Smith. "In my opinion, no matter what we come up with or say, it's just not something that you can wrap your mind around, of how a mother could do something like this." When officers told Megan that they had found more than one baby, she appeared confused. She later said she had just made a guess and wasn't actually sure how many they would find. The question everyone needed answers to was why. Megan eventually told detectives that she wanted to help her babies avoid the terrible life she would ultimately have given them. She said her life was too chaotic, consumed by drugs and alcohol, and coupled with her mental health issues. She said she knew she couldn't take care of them physically, emotionally, or financially. "I deprive my little babies of the opportunity of life," she said. "I think my mind was just so out of it. All I was focused on was the next fix." Between the years of 1996 and 2006, Megan had fallen pregnant 7 times and police think she would have given birth alone and in secret in her home. And there were no records of her ever having been to a hospital. Apart from the baby that had been a stillborn, she had killed every other one she had within minutes of them entering the world. She had often covered them in chemicals to conceal any smell of decomposition, wrapped them up in various things and hidden them in the garage, before carrying on with her life. Megan and Darren had 3 children still living in the house, and detectives needed to know why she had made the decision to kill her other babies. She told police it all began happening after she became addicted to methamphetamine. Her first 2 daughters were born before she began using the drug, and although she was pregnant with her 3rd living daughter when she was heavily into her addiction, too many people were aware of the pregnancy, including Darren. So she had to go through with everything. After her daughter was born, she barely told anyone about her other pregnancies, and those she did tell were later told by Megan that she had miscarried. She said she was selfish and ultimately spent over a decade choosing drugs over anything else. It appeared from everything that Megan had said, it was entirely of her own doing, and no other person played a part in it. She told police she had wanted to move the bodies out of the garage but was unsure how to do so without being caught. Neighbors in the area said they were devastated and totally blindsided by Megan's arrest. The majority of people said that although they noticed her gaining and losing weight over the years, they had no idea she was pregnant. Darren's family issued a statement saying they were in a state of shock and confusion. "Are mourning this tragic loss of life, and we are trying to stay strong and help each other through this awful event." Despite Darren disputing the possibility of paternity due to the affair his ex-wife had been having, he was later confirmed to be the father of all 7 babies. Darren told police he only had knowledge of a couple of pregnancies, but was told Megan had miscarried. He said the discovery has shocked him as much as anyone. Authorities said they didn't believe he was aware of the murders and was not deemed a person of interest at the time. In the end, there just turned out to be no evidence that would implicate him, officers said. When asked how he could not have known about any of this, the police captain Michael Roberts said, "That's the million-dollar question." Furthermore, no one had any idea of how Megan's growing children, who were still living in the house, did not notice their mother was pregnant either. On one occasion, Megan had actually given birth upstairs in the bathroom, before killing the newborn and cleaning up, all while members of her family were sat just downstairs. As hearings for Megan Huntsman began, she arrived at court with cuffs around her ankles and wrists, often looking straight at the floor as the legal team spoke. She was held on a $6 million bail, $1 million for each baby. Megan's legal team were keen for a speedy process. It was stated that Megan would not face the death penalty for the charges. This was because she was accused of killing her babies between 1996 and 2006, and this was before the law in Utah changed in 2007. This change in the law made murder a capital offense if a victim was younger than 14. Until this law passed, killing a child was not actually considered one of the factors that could make someone eligible for the death penalty. These were very cold, calculated killings, said prosecutor Jeff Berman. She was a woman who was remarkably, unbelievably, incredibly indifferent and callous. Judge Darrell McDade was presiding, and he recalled that he was the judge who had signed the initial search warrant on the day that the babies' bodies were found. He said he had quietly hoped and prayed he wouldn't be the one assigned to deal with it in court. "I really thought I'd seen it all until this case. It shocked me then and it shocks me now," he said. Megan agreed to enter a plea rather than go to trial. This was under an agreement that could reduce her minimum sentence to 5 years, but by taking this it would leave fewer options for her to appeal down the line. Prosecutors were satisfied to allow this to go ahead and said that it would have been hard to prove a case against her at trial if she hadn't cooperated with police. On the 12th of February, 2015, Megan Huntsman pleaded guilty to all 6 counts of murder. As part of the plea deal, prosecutors had agreed to recommend that the 5 years to life in prison sentences run concurrent to one another. But Judge Darrell McDade was not satisfied by this and said that it would be inappropriate for the terms to run concurrently. Following this, the Utah Board of Pardons and Paroles set Megan's parole hearing for April 2064. She will be 89 years old. Prosecutor Jeff Bumman said that even then he doesn't think she will ever be released. "My guess is that she'll serve the rest of her life," he said. In court, her 3 daughters read statements and stood by their mother, saying she had always been the best mom to them. "No matter what anyone thinks you are a good person," one said. Another read, "This is not the mom I know. The mom I know was the one who had dinner for us every night, a clean house, and was a loving mother. Nobody could guess my mom would do anything like this." Megan's sister and mother also showed their defense of Megan. "Megan is not a monster," her sister told the judge. "She's not evil. From what I understand, she was scared." The crimes of Megan Huntsman left the neighborhood shattered and family and friends utterly devastated. It is simply an unfathomable series of events that cannot be made sense of, and it is something that will haunt many people for a long time to come. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, and later moved to Cedar City, Utah, with his family after his father finished dental school. As a child, Michael was very active and enjoyed playing sports like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He also excelled in school and achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska for the summer, where he quickly proved himself as a leader, rising to the position of line manager and overseeing a team of over a dozen men. This experience showcased his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then embarked on a mission trip to South Brazil with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which deepened his faith and commitment to his religious community. When he returned to the United States, he pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earl, and they fell in love. They got married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be a devoted husband and father, often spending quality time with his family at sports events, school concerts, and working on projects together in the garage. On January 4th, 2023, a shocking discovery was made at the Haight residence in Enoch. 8 bodies were found, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned. The events leading up to this gruesome finding began when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work. Their concerned colleagues contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence. When officers arrived, they knocked on the door but received no response. As they surveyed the property, it seemed empty. Considering the Haight's had 5 children, the police reached out to the Iron County School District to check if any of the kids were in school that day. However, it was found that none of the children were present. Before entering the home, the police cleared the premises to ensure it was safe to do so. After a thorough search, authorities confirmed that no one required medical attention, and there was no active threat. The Haight's single-story residence with a basement was declared a crime scene, and detectives arrived shortly after. In the main bedroom, detectives found 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach. His head turned to the left, with one arm under his head on a pillow and a blanket covering part of his body. Tasha, Gavin's mother, was also partially covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, detectives found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earl, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head resting on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, similar to her daughter and grandson. In Bree's room, the 12-year-old girl was found lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Amon's room, a 7-year-old boy was found lying face down in the corner, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, with her head on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, with her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. In the exercise room of the basement, the detectives found Michael Haight lying on top of a sleeping bag. Sadly, all 8 family members were found dead from gunshot wounds. It quickly became clear to the detectives that Michael Haight was the main suspect, and they believed he had killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. When detectives started investigating, a neighbor provided vital information that helped them reconstruct the crime's timeline. The neighbor told police she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, and as she left her room, heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, realizing it was after the allowed date for fireworks in the neighborhood, she felt annoyed rather than alarmed by the noise. The neighbor reported hearing an initial loud bang, followed by 2 more in quick succession, then a short pause, another bang, and a longer pause before the final bang. Based on this testimony and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detective inferred that the loud noises heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events that unfolded that night, leading them to believe that Michael Haight committed the brutal killings during this time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives discovered a 2020 report from an unnamed individual who had notified the Utah Division of Child and Family Services about abuse in the Haight household. According to the report, 14-year-old Macy had confided in this individual about her fear of her father sparking a further investigation. The authorities then interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she revealed disturbing information. Her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she lived in fear of being killed by him. She reported that the violent attacks began in 2017 and recounted an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. Michael Haight denied hurting his daughter when questioned by detectives, passing off the incidents as misunderstandings and attributing his emotional state to his father's recent death and his brother's divorce. He claimed to have taken out his frustrations on his older daughter. Despite this, Tasha chose not to press charges, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to pursue the case, as it did not meet the legal requirements for prosecution. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which indicated that her relationship with Michael was not life-threatening. As a result, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months. Further investigation revealed a different side of Michael, unknown to the community. According to Tasha's friends, They had to speak quietly or turn on the kitchen water when visiting Tasha. As they suspected Michael was monitoring and eavesdropping on their conversations, Tasha's friends would often help her clean the house when they visited, which prevented Michael from finding fault with her. When texting Tasha, her friends noticed that she would respond with brief, positive messages, likely to maintain a positive image in case Michael read them. This suggested that everything was fine in their marriage. The detectives investigating the case discovered that Michael exhibited highly controlling behavior towards Tasha. For instance, he would take away her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Another red flag was his overreaction when Tasha bought a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a dirty one, which was a legitimate need. Michael's anger was unwarranted, and he claimed the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Aman, was increasingly imitating Michael's bad behavior. When Tasha gave Aman instructions, he would respond, which concerned Tasha as it showed his lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Tasha's friends reported that in 2022, Tasha attempted to prioritize her own well-being by getting her nails done, a rare treat for her given her many responsibilities. However, her husband Michael refused to let her do so, imposing strict limits on her autonomy and freedom. Moreover, Michael frequently disregarded or ignored Tasha's instructions, and their friend Aman often followed his lead in doing so. Tasha felt more confident in her appearance after indulging herself, and she decided to get her nails done every month. However, Michael was unhappy about this decision and expressed his disapproval, worried about the cost. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 per month, but Michael was unconvinced, arguing that the money could be better spent on their children. Michael's reaction was rooted in his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight, which had been a sensitive topic for her since Michael had often called her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael became furious and accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to explain the sudden change in her appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalated as he tried to manipulate Tasha's weight loss, pleading with her to stop losing weight because he was worried that other men might find her attractive. This demand was driven by his own insecurities and desire for complete control over Tasha's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about an incident where the kitchen table broke, and Tasha needed to buy a new one. However, Michael refused to give her the money, further demonstrating his controlling behavior. Tasha was fed up with the old table and decided to take initiative by refinishing it to make it look better and more functional. However, Michael was unhappy with her decision because she didn't ask for his permission first. Michael was extremely frugal during the holiday season. Despite earning a good income, he only gave Tasha $100 for each of their 5 children to buy presents, which was not enough in Tasha's opinion. Tasha always made sure her children had a wonderful Christmas, but Michael refused to provide more funds, claiming that he worked hard for his money and saw no reason to give more to his family. He believed that his income was rightfully his alone. Michael's passion for reducing waste and conserving resources led him to implement strict rules on household habits. He forced Tasha to wash and reuse plastic bags, even if they had been used only once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags added to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling burdened and overwhelmed. Michael's controlling behavior extended to every aspect of Tasha's life, including her daily routines. For instance, he demanded that she use baby wipes for cleaning, claiming it was better for the environment and more cost-effective. However, this requirement caused Tasha discomfort, hygiene issues, and unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to follow Michael's instructions, she would face severe consequences, which he made clear would lead to serious trouble. This threat instilled fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her no choice but to obey Michael's demands. Natasha confided in her friends that while Michael had been cruel to her throughout their marriage, he had never directed this cruelty towards their children until the late 2010s. However, over time, the abuse towards their daughter Macy escalated, driving her to consider suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for his daughter Macy, demanding she earn perfect grades despite her struggles, which were exacerbated by the emotional burden of his abusive behavior. This pressure was crushing for Macy. Macy's friends shared a disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael returned home to find Macy comforted by her mother. He became enraged and ordered Macy to clean her room. This event left Macy deeply disturbed, remembering the hatred and evil she saw in her father's eyes. The detectives also discovered an incident where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael while playing with a changing table. Michael responded by blaming his wife Tasha for their children's behavior, calling them the worst and most disrespectful in the world. He then humiliated Tasha, calling her fat and ugly in front of their 5 children. This painful incident prompted Tasha to plan her escape and file for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Tasha realized she had to leave her husband Michael after witnessing his abusive behavior and lack of self-control. She knew staying in the marriage would negatively impact her children, and their well-being was more important than her marital commitment. In December 2022, Tasha filed for divorce but asked for the papers to be delivered after Christmas to give her children one last normal holiday before the separation. When Michael received the papers, he tried to act normal, but Tasha saw through it. He told her to leave the children behind, but she refused, taking them to her mother's home in Lynn, Utah. Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house, trying to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him, but she refused, sensing danger. After filing for divorce, Tasha's mother moved in to support her and the children. However, Michael's actions worsened the situation. He refused to leave the family home, instead moving into the basement. Tasha discovered he had secretly transferred $220,000 from their children's savings accounts without her knowledge or consent. She also found that her inherited firearms were missing, leaving her family vulnerable. The couple's children, Macy and Briley, were affected by the constant drama at home. Macy had a secret phone to record her father's outbursts as evidence for the divorce, while Briley found solace at a neighbor's house. Both girls were relieved about their parents' divorce. On January 3rd, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney, expressing concerns about her divorce and Michael's volatile behavior. Although she had relocated him to the basement, the attorneys pressed her about feeling safe. Tasha reassured them she never feared for her or her children's well-being. But in hindsight, her optimism was tragically misplaced. A disturbing discovery emerged from the digital evidence found on the family's computers and cell phones. Just days before the tragic shooting, Michael made a series of concerning Google searches on December 30th at 10:41 p.m. These searches focused on firearms and shooting-related topics, revealing his sinister intentions. The search results showed Michael had asked alarming questions such as the loudness of a 9mm gunshot and what a gunshot sounds like. Before taking his own life, Michael wrote a note expressing his desire to end the controlling behavior he felt he was subjected to by his wife. He stated that he couldn't handle the situation for another day and wanted to escape the manipulation. Michael's note conveyed deep frustration and desperation as he repeatedly asked for help but felt ignored. He emphasized his determination not to be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated as he carefully planned the murders to catch his wife and children off guard. On October 3rd, 2008, 33-year-old Jill Tetro was driving his car following some cryptic and mysterious directions that would eventually lead him to a garage in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. He had recently arrived from DC and now separated. He had been using the popular dating site Plenty of Fish, hoping to meet someone. He had recently started talking to a woman named Sheena, who went by the profile name Spiderwebs, and the pair had hit it off immediately. Shill said that Sheena was keen to meet and almost pushy to get a plan together. Although the directions were odd and confusing, he just assumed that Sheena didn't want to give him her physical address for some reason and drove out to pick her up for dinner and a movie. Sheena said she would leave the garage door open for him to drive into. He reached the location just after 7 p.m. He couldn't see anyone and the garage door was only partially raised, so he parked up and entered on foot. Jill remembered feeling uneasy about everything, but shook the feelings off and carried on anyway. He stood in the dark room for a second, when suddenly he felt someone grab him from behind and start prodding him with a stun gun. He turned around and came face to face with a man towering over him, wearing a hockey mask. The masked man took out a gun, pointed it at Jill, and ordered him to get on the ground. Once he was on the floor, he forced duct tape over his eyes. Adrenaline raced through him, and Jill said he made a decision that if he was going to die, it would not be on the masked man's terms. He ripped the tape off his eyes and grabbed the gun out of the man's hands. In this moment, he realized the gun was plastic and fake. The pair struggled for a few minutes before Jill rolled under the garage door and made it outside. He crawled into the alley behind the garage before the masked man started grabbing his legs and tried to pull him back in. The effects of the stun gun had left his legs like jelly, and he was trying to move as quickly as he possibly could. With one last push and with everything he had, he fought his way out of the man's grasp. Outside of the alley, he saw a couple out for a walk, begged them for help, but the couple was scared that this was part of a potential plan to mug them. The man chased him out and assured the couple there was nothing to worry about, and his friend was just messing around. They quickly left the scene, but the couple had clearly startled the man in the hockey mask, and he retreated back towards the garage. Jill finally made it to his truck and managed to escape. He never spoke of this incident to the police, embarrassed that he was duped by the fake profile and terrified that the man would find him and kill him. He convinced himself that it was not as serious as he'd thought, and he said no more about it. Little did anyone know the same thing was about to happen to someone else, and the outcome would be far worse. 38-year-old John Brian Altinger, known to his friends as Johnny, worked as an oil field equipment manufacturer. Described as honest and hardworking, he was quiet, but once someone got to know him, he had a great sense of humor. He, like Jill, was also using dating sites to meet people. He had just started chatting to a lady named Jen on Plenty of Fish. After building a good connection, Johnny told his friends he was going to meet up with her in person. His brother said he was looking for love and thought he finally might have found it. He sent his friends an email telling them of his plans and also sent them the directions of the location that he and Jen would be meeting at too. Days would pass and friends would not hear a word from Johnny. Never out of touch for this long, everyone knew something was off. They all became even more concerned after they received some strange emails. In these emails, Johnny claimed that Jen had taken him on a surprise trip to Costa Rica and would be there until mid-December. His brother Gary said it was the weirdest message he had ever received. Shortly after this, Johnny's employers received an email informing them of his resignation, which came as a total shock. They emailed back, but got no response from him when they requested a forwarding address to send his final paycheck to. Johnny's friends eventually broke into his condo to start their own investigation. Despite his emails saying he was traveling, to their concern, they found his passport and an empty suitcase with no indication that he had packed for a holiday, nor had he left the apartment in a good place for someone that was leaving for 2 months. Following this, the Edmonton Police Service now agreed there was reason to be concerned, and subsequently launched a homicide investigation. Fortunately for the police, they followed the directions that Johnny had sent to his friends, and were unknowingly led to the same garage that Jill had been lured into. The garage was being rented by a man named Mark Twitchell. But who was he? And why would Johnny and Jill have ended up at his garage? Mark Andrew Twitchell was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada in 1979. He had dreams of making big Hollywood blockbusters and studied at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in the Radio and Television Arts program. He had a passion for making costumes and props, which soon moved into writing and directing his own films. In 2001, he met his first wife, Megan. She said he was charming and funny, and they got on straight away. She recalled that Mark had such a fascination with films that once he found something he liked, he would become fixated on it, trying to emulate it in every way. She soon noticed that Mark was spending a lot of time online, often making bizarre and random profiles to talk to people on various sites and forums. He would have disturbing conversations with her about his desire to feel what it was like to kill someone and how he would choose the right person to murder. Already on a downward spiral, the relationship started to crumble even more when Megan found out that Mark was being unfaithful and lying to her constantly. After just 4 years together, the pair would divorce. Mark then met his second wife, Jess, and the pair would go on to have a daughter. He bought his new family a lovely home, But little did Jess know it had been purchased using fraudulent documents that he had used to get the mortgage. He would soon quit his job, but regularly would drive into town pretending as if he was still working while living off investors' money. He threw himself into his scriptwriting and directing even more, and in 2007 he directed a full-length fan film prequel called Star Wars: Secrets of the Rebellion, which even included a cameo by Jeremy Bulloch, a British actor known for his role as Boba Fett in Star Wars. Mark spent a lot of time recreating costumes and making props for the film. Although it garnered a decent amount of buzz and attention online, the film would never see a release. Mark then went on to shoot an 8-minute-long horror film called House of Cards. The storyline was about a man who goes to meet a woman he met online, only to realize he had been lured there by someone using a fake profile. Once inside, the man was attacked and bound to a table, where he was murdered by a man in a hockey mask. On September 1st, 2008, he started renting a garage to film in. Mark had handed out leaflets to neighbors saying that he would be shooting a lot and if they heard any screams coming from the garage over the coming weeks, not to be alarmed. He also had a strong fixation with the TV show Dexter, a crime drama about a forensic technician, Dexter Morgan, who doubled as a vigilante serial killer. He became so obsessed with the show, he often referred to himself as Dexter. Mark was quickly found and brought in for questioning on the 19th of October. He spent almost an hour talking to Detective Mike Tabler and was very keen to talk about his love of films and his latest scripts and projects. For the most part, detectives were satisfied that his answers seemed plausible. He appeared honest and forthcoming, and he was not deemed a suspect. The police needed to look elsewhere, and they took to the public to try and get more information about Johnny. 2 witnesses came forward reporting to have seen who they now believe to be him. It was the couple that had actually seen Jill running away from the garage that day, not Johnny. Because of the times and dates they told police they saw this happen, authorities now knew this was no isolated incident and there was a potential second victim out there. They thought that if they could find this mystery man, they could find Johnny too. Police received word that Johnny had a red Mazda. After his first interview with Detective Tabler, Mark sent an email over to him with some more info that might be useful. In this email, he said he had recently bought a car worth $20,000 from a complete stranger in the street for just $40. It was all too coincidental and his story now seemed totally improbable. Mark then sent a second email to his production team, requesting that they stop talking to the police. He was immediately called in for another interview. With the interview now at a standstill, Mark was free to walk out. Authorities got warrants to conduct a thorough search of the garage in Mark's home and confiscated some bits and pieces, including his laptop. The garage was small, cold, and fairly empty. A table, some cabinets, and various random props and boxes scattered around, and the windows were covered over. Police used luminol in the hopes of detecting any blood. The garage was covered and showed an extremely grisly scene had taken place. While looking through his laptop, they found some extremely disturbing documents. They discovered a dark and violent 42-page document that Mark had deleted. It was called SK Confessions, later understood to be Serial Killer Confessions. It began, "This story is based on true events. The names and events were altered slightly to protect the guilty." It spoke of his descent into becoming a serial killer and how he would lure victims using online profiles, detailing the horrific things he wanted to do to them. In the document, Mark wrote in detail about the murder of a man named Jim. Jim police could only assume was Johnny Altinger. He talked of stabbing him and watching him bleed out on the floor as the victim gave him a pure Hollywood reaction. I grabbed his jaw with my gloved hand and moved it while making a funny voice to make it look like it was talking, and chuckled to myself for the total silliness of it all. Part of the story read, before he detailed how he dismembered the body like a pumpkin for Halloween. Throughout the writing, he talked to finding a garage to use as a location as well as sourcing his hockey mask, props, and knives. He referred to this garage as his kill room. Police impounded Mark's car as well, and a search found Johnny's blood inside, as well as a post-it note reminding him to clean up his kill room and then cheat on his wife. From all of this pieced together, police concluded that on the day Johnny had gone to meet with the person he thought was Jen, he had actually been met with Mark Twitchell. Mark bludgeoned him with a pipe before stabbing him to death and dismembering him. He tried and failed to burn Johnny's body and eventually put his remains in a sewer. In another document he wrote called Profile of a Psychopath, he admitted to being a pathological liar that cheated constantly and was unable to hold down jobs, as he despised working for anyone but himself. Mark Twitchell was arrested on the 31st of October 2008 and was charged with first-degree murder the same day. He and his second wife Jess were divorced shortly after his arrest. Mark then spent the day driving around in the back of the police car with detectives pleading with him to tell them where Johnny's body was. Mark stayed silent the whole journey. He was also taken back to the garage, but still he said nothing. Gillis Tatro, who had now heard the details about Johnny's case, would walk into the police station and tell them everything that had happened to him, making the detectives' already strong case against Mark even stronger. Mark's once-deleted document SK Confessions describes something so similar happening to Gillis that Mark could no longer justify the writing as being just a gruesome piece of fiction. Authorities searched for Johnny's remains for nearly 2 years, with Mark refusing to tell them what he had done to him. Eventually, Mark asked to talk to the police from his cell. He silently slid a piece of paper across the table, which was a map and a series of directions. This led to a sewer. Johnny's remains were finally found, just half a block away from where the search for his body had stopped. In March 2011, Mark Twitchell's trial began. He first offered to plead guilty to interfering with human remains, but the Crown rejected this and pushed on for a first-degree murder conviction. The case sparked a lot of media attention, and Mark was frequently referred to as the Dexter Killer, given his fascination with the drama. He took to the stand in his own defense and would make some baffling claims. In a shock line of defense, he confessed to killing Johnny, but claimed he had done so as an act of self-defense. He claimed he had hatched a plan after he made his short film House of Cards. The mini-movie gave him an idea to try and create a buzz around what he hoped might turn into a franchise. He said he lured Johnny and Jill to the garage, but alleged that he was going to tell them it was all a big hoax in the hope they would write about it online and get people talking. He said he bought everything he needed to stage the garage as a kill room, and although bizarre, he said it was something that had got out of control in a way he didn't plan for. Mark said that Johnny had become angry and a physical fight had broke out before Mark could assure Johnny it was all a joke. Mark grabbed a pipe and hit Johnny over the head before reaching for a knife and stabbing him to protect himself. He told the jurors that, in a blind panic, he cut up Johnny's body and tried to burn it. When this failed, he cut it up some more and dumped it down a sewer. He then said he later broke into Johnny's home and wrote emails into his name to his friends and workplace before stealing his printer and laptop, and the document entitled SK Confessions. It was all just fiction and random pieces of research on serial killers, he said. After a 3-week trial and just 4 hours of deliberations, Mark Twitchell was found guilty and handed a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. He then faced an attempted murder charge for luring and attacking Jill, but this charge would later be dropped as he had already secured the maximum sentence possible. Mark appealed his conviction on the basis that he felt the media was so focused on the case and the reporting was so sensationalized that it affected the jury and created bias. He soon dropped his appeal. The TV show Dexter had also been a huge focus before, during, and after the trial, but the writer of Dexter weighed in and said, "A deliberate way, no book ever written will make you capable of doing so. There is no magic words that will turn you into a psychopath." In May 2013, it was reported that Mark had purchased a TV for his prison cell, so he could catch up on every Dexter episode that he had missed since he was arrested. He also has set up a dating page on a site for inmates. He said he had made some terrible, regrettable choices and is looking for an interesting, intelligent, open-minded, delightfully imperfect woman to relate to and share amusing observations with. After his traumatic deal with Mark, Jill Tatro met with Johnny Altinger's mother. He said that she had held his hand and said she was so happy he was still here. He went on to write a book about his experience. It is unknown how far Mark Twitchell would have taken his crimes had he not been caught. He was obsessed with blurring fantasy and reality and confused fame with infamy in the most disturbing way imaginable. Jill continues to rebuild his life and move past the traumatic events of that day in October 2008. And Johnny's family and friends continue to remember his fun-loving and kind personality. They determine that his life will not be defined by the appalling crime committed against him. He will instead be remembered for the joy and laughter that he brought to so many people. As the world heralded 1993 with joy and resolutions, one man in London set an eerie New Year's resolution of his own, a resolution to become a notorious killer. His target? Unsuspecting men in the gay community. But who was Colin Ireland, and what drove him to declare such a harrowing resolution? Why did he choose to transform a symbol of new beginnings into a dark and twisted game of cat and mouse? Hi, my name is James. Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In today's deep dive, we peel back the layers of one of the UK's most calculated serial killers, a man who sought fame through the fear he instilled. We'll uncover the story of how he executed his plan with chilling precision and overshadowed a bustling city's celebratory spirit by a series of gruesome crimes. To understand the mind behind the moniker, the Gay Slayer, we must delve into the past of Colin Ireland. Born in 1954 in Dartford, Kent, Ireland's early life was marked by turbulence, upheaval, and poverty. His childhood, spent in an unsettled home, was the first chapter in a life marked by discontent and detachment. Raised by a single mother, Ireland's formative years were a carousel of different men entering and leaving his life. This instability laid the groundwork for a personality that craved control, a trait that would later manifest in the most sinister ways. His parents were unmarried 17-year-olds. His father left soon after his birth, and Ireland didn't know his identity. Due to his mother's money problems, they had to move a number of times. In spite of all the hardships, Ireland had a close relationship with his mother and remembered her as affectionate and benevolent. Ireland said that as a child, he was a thin, lanky little runt, always getting the worst of it from schoolyard bullies. This made Ireland frequently miss school. As a result, he didn't get a proper education and became sad and withdrawn, choosing his few friends among the most unthreatening kids. As a teenager, Ireland found himself entangled with the law. His crimes, though initially petty, hinted at a deeper struggle within, a struggle for identity and a desperate need to assert his significance in a world where he felt invisible. Constantly in trouble of his own making, Ireland was sent to boardstools and prisons for theft, robbery, blackmail, and burglary. He ran away to London at 16 and hung out in an amusement arcade with a bad reputation where young boys were targeted by pedophiles. Ireland was approached by some of them. Besides, one of his jobs was a bouncer on a gay club. That's where his understanding of gay subcultures came from. As Ireland himself described the 70s, I was entering what I call the lost period, common to those who suffer from psychopathy. In between custodial periods, a lot of the 70s were a blur. I spent my time detached and wondering. In 1982, Ireland married Virginia Zammit, who was confined to a wheelchair. His colleague witnessed a pleasant family life when he visited them. They divorced 5 years later after Ireland's adultery. In 1989, he married Janet Young. He was abusive and after 4 months left his wife abruptly when she was away for the weekend, stealing over £10,000 from her account and leaving her completely broke. He moved to Southend-on-Sea, Essex, roughly 60 kilometers east of London, and lived in a hostel there. Later, he moved to his own flat. There, in this flat, Ireland decided to become a serial killer as his New Year's resolution. Drifting through adulthood, Ireland's life was a patchwork of odd jobs and fleeting relationships. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there was a growing fascination with infamy and a desire to etch his name into criminal history. Ireland immersed himself in the dark world of serial killers. He studied them not with a sense of horror, but with an analytical eye. What made them tick? How did they elude capture? These were the questions that consumed him. He spent many hours reading about serial killers and learning about geographic profiling, hence deciding to commit his murders far away from his home. A killer usually commits crimes in a certain radius of about 7 miles from his home. That's why Ireland chose London for his crime scene. He also planned to have at least 5 victims because he had read that a person needs to have such body count to qualify as a serial killer. The year 1993 witnessed a terrifying series of crimes that shook the core of London's LGBTQ+ community. Colin Ireland, a man whose unassuming demeanor masked a sinister agenda, embarked on a calculated campaign of terror, meticulously planning and executing a series of murders with chilling precision. Ireland's hunting ground was the vibrant gay scene of London. He frequented the Culhern Club, a known gay bar seeking out his potential victims. Here, amid the pulsing music and crowded dance floor, Ireland would select and study his targets, plotting their fates with cold detachment. Ireland sought men who liked the passive role in F&M so he could easily restrain them as they believed it was a sexual game. Members of the pub would wear color-coded handkerchiefs to indicate their sexual proclivities. Ireland was posing as a dominant partner. His first victim, Peter Walker, was a 45-year-old choreographer. Ireland met Walker at the Culhern, and what started as a night of perceived intimacy quickly turned into a nightmare. Walker's body was discovered in his apartment, revealing the horror of Ireland's actions. Bound, gagged, and suffocated by a plastic bag placed over his head, Walker's death was just the beginning of Ireland's gruesome spree. Ireland placed 2 teddy bears in a sexual position on Walker's body and burned some of his pubic hair so he could smell it. While searching the flat, he discovered that Walker was HIV positive. Enraged, Ireland stuffed a condom into Walker's mouth and another one into his nostril. Each crime scene told a story of meticulous planning and ruthless execution. He carried a murder kit, a rope, handcuffs, and a change of clothing. Ireland left little evidence behind, confounding the police and instilling a growing sense of fear within the community. He was methodical, ensuring each scene was thoroughly cleaned, removing any traces that could lead back to him. He also stayed in the flat till morning to avoid suspicion from leaving in the middle of the night. To describe the nights after his murders, Ireland said, "Go cold. It wasn't something that I could cope with, to be honest." Ireland disposed of all the things he touched by throwing them out of a train window on his way back to Southend. When the police discovered the body, they assumed it was the result of a sexual game gone wrong. 2 months later, Ireland returned to the pub where he met 37-year-old librarian Christopher Dunn, who invited Ireland to his flat. Ireland tied, handcuffed, then beat and tortured his helpless victim before suffocating him by stuffing pieces of cloth into his mouth. After murdering him, Ireland used Dunn's PIN and bank card to withdraw $200 from his account. The police assumed it was an accident as a result of a sex game and didn't link his death to Walker's. Ireland was getting more and more confident as his New Year's resolution was coming together. Ireland met 35-year-old businessman Perry Bradley III at the Culhern pub. He was the son of Texas Democratic Party fundraiser Perry Bradley Jr. In his Kensington flat, Bradley refused to be tied, but Ireland told him that he couldn't perform sexually without it. Bradley reluctantly agreed, and then Ireland told him that he was a thief and he just wanted his money and PIN. After Bradley gave Ireland his PIN, Ireland told him that he should try to fall asleep as he wouldn't leave his flat till morning. Bradley did fall asleep, and Ireland realized that Bradley could identify him and strangled him. Then he placed a doll on top of the dead man's body. The heinous crimes of Colin Ireland not only sent shockwaves through the communities he targeted, but also captured the relentless gaze of the media. The press dubbed him the Gay Slayer, a moniker that sensationalized his horrific acts and underscored the homophobic undercurrents of the time. Within 3 days, on June 7th, Ireland was back at the Culhern. He met 33-year-old Andrew Collier, a housing warden, and went to his home. Again, Ireland handcuffed and keyed his victim to the bed, demanding his bank details. After killing Collier's cat, Ireland strangled Collier. He placed a condom on Collier's penis and fastened the dead cat's mouth over it and put the cat's tail into Collier's mouth. On June 15th, Ireland met Maltese chef Emmanuel Spiteri. Aged 41, he cuffed, bound, and strangled his victim, then stayed in his flat watching TV and eating Spiteri's food. After cleaning the scene, Ireland set fire to the flat, but it only caused minor damage. As the body count rose, so did the alarm. The gay community, already marginalized, now found itself in the grip of a predator who walked among them, unseen, unknown, and deadly. But what was the motive behind these abhorrent acts? Was it a deep-seated animosity towards the gay community or something more cold and calculated? And what were the critical mistakes Ireland made and how did they lead to his capture? As the death toll rose, London's Metropolitan Police found themselves grappling with a cunning predator. The investigation into Colin Ireland's crimes was a race against time, a complex puzzle that demanded not just diligence, but innovation in the face of a killer who seemed always one step ahead. Initially, the investigation faced significant challenges. Ireland's careful planning and meticulous cleanup at each crime scene left frustratingly few clues. The killer's methodical approach in disguising his identity and movements compounded the difficulty, turning the investigation into a labyrinthine task. Detectives were confronted with a disturbing pattern. All victims were men from the gay community, their bodies discovered in their own homes, a sign of trust brutally exploited. This realization led to a focused investigation in London's gay scene, particularly around the Coleherne pub where Ireland hunted for his victims. The breakthrough came from meticulous police work and a stroke of luck. A forgotten fingerprint at a crime scene, a chance capture on one of London's first CCTV cameras. These were the pivotal moments that began to unravel Ireland's web of deceit. When Ireland was in Andrew Collier's flat, they heard a noise outside and came up to the window. Ireland gripped a horizontal metal bar across the window and forgot to wipe it off. The police then found these fingerprints. And finally, Ireland was captured on CCTV. Some witnesses said Spattery left Coleherne with a man. Then police traced his route home. His train journey went through Charing Cross Station, fitted with one of London's first CCTV cameras. Each piece of evidence was a precious key, unlocking parts of a puzzle that Ireland thought he had so carefully hidden. But what was it that finally led to Ireland's downfall? How did the police connect the dots in a case that seemed to defy resolution? The relentless pursuit of justice in the Colin Ireland case turned a crucial corner with a single seemingly innocuous phone call. Ireland, emboldened by his actions, made a call to the police, taunting them about his crimes. The day after Peter Walker's murder, having heard no news reports of his crime, he anonymously called the Samaritans and the Sun, telling them that he had murdered Walker and locked his dogs in another room. Later, the police received a call from Dunn's killer taunting them because they had failed to link his death to Walker's. In his next anonymous call to the police, he asked, "Are you still interested in the death of Peter Walker? Why have you stopped the investigation? Doesn't the death of a homosexual man mean anything? I will do another. I have always dreamed of doing the perfect murder." After Collier's death, Ireland called Kensington police and said that he had killed 4 men and they had to stop him. He told the police that he had read many books on serial killers and said, "If you don't stop me, it will be 1 a week." He told the police that he had studied the FBI manual, that is, Whoever Fights Monsters, by ex-FBI agent and serial killer specialist Robert Ressler. "I have got the book," he said. "I know how many you have to do." Ireland later said that the TV crime series The Bill had also given him many of his ideas and police evasion methods. Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks said, "Because you read books about serial killers doesn't mean you have any interest in becoming a serial killer yourself. But if that is your motive, then actually reading books can give you an awareness of the ways in which serial killers have acted in the past." Armed with this new evidence, the police intensified their efforts. A suspect started to take shape from the shadows. It was a breakthrough moment in the investigation, a lead that they desperately needed. On 19th of July, 1993, Ireland went to his solicitor. He said that he was on the CCTV, but that he had not killed Sputtery. He went to his flat for sex, but there was another man. He didn't want a threesome and left. The investigation took a dramatic turn as law enforcement officers matched Ireland's fingerprint to the Collier crime scene. His arrest was a moment of triumph mixed with stark horror as the extent of his crimes came to light. Ireland's overconfidence combined with advanced police work and the critical clues helped bring the killer to justice. The capture of Colin Ireland was more than just the conclusion of a manhunt. It was a moment that brought some semblance of closure to the victims' families and the community shaken by fear. It also opened up vital conversations about the safety of marginalized groups. The trial of Colin Ireland was set to be a gripping chapter in British legal history, raising questions about the nature of evil and the psyche of a man who sought infamy through brutality. What revelations would his trial bring? A legal journey that would reveal the full extent of his chilling crimes was just beginning. The trial was a meticulous dissection of Ireland's actions, each day unraveling more about the man behind the murders. The prosecution presented a case built on a foundation of solid evidence. Ireland, facing overwhelming evidence, made a decision that stunned the courtroom. He confessed to his crimes, detailing them with a cold detachment that sent shivers down the spines of all present. His confession was not just an admission of guilt, but a hair-raising narrative of his calculated and brutal actions. Ironically, pleading guilty to all his murders and confessing, Ireland avoided the publicity he so deeply craved. The heart of the trial, however, lay in the stories of the victims. Their lives, tragically lost, remind us of the human cost of hate and prejudice. Were these 5 murders Ireland's only crimes? Or did he kill others? Serial killers often withhold some of their murders from the police to gain a sense of control over them, even in prison. In January 1993, soon after Ireland's resolution, the police found a dead gay man in his home in Soho. They believed this might have been done by Ireland. However, the gay slayer never claimed this crime. Along with his other victims, a perilous shadow loomed over Hollywood star Tom Cruise. In a chilling twist of fate, Cruise, then at the height of his career and married to Nicole Kidman, narrowly escaped a potentially fatal encounter. According to statements and police files that later surfaced, Ireland had spotted Cruise in a London bar in 1993. Driven by a perilous and misguided belief, Ireland falsely assumed Cruise to be gay and plotted to make him one of his victims. The killer's sinister plan was unexpectedly thwarted. Cruise, possibly sensing something amiss or merely coincidental in his timing, left the bar abruptly, eluding Ireland's grasp. Ireland's conviction was a foregone conclusion, but the sentencing phase was a crucial moment. The judge, in a powerful address, condemned Ireland's actions, emphasizing the gravity and premeditated nature of the crimes. The judge called Ireland exceptionally frightening and dangerous. He said to him, "To take one human life is an outrage. To take 5 is carnage. In my view, it is absolutely clear you should never be released." Ireland was sentenced to 5 counts of life imprisonment for the murders. But the story does not end with Ireland's conviction. There are unconfirmed rumors that Ireland strangled his cellmate, a convicted child killer, in Wakefield Prison, Yorkshire. After that, he was transferred to maximum security lodgings at Whitemoor Prison, Cambridgeshire, into a private cell of his own. His pattern of selecting victims, meticulous planning, and the psychological games played with law enforcement are now studied in criminal psychology courses worldwide. Moreover, the investigation into Ireland's crimes highlighted the importance of community involvement in criminal cases. The breakthroughs in this case were a result of not just police work, but also the cooperation of the community, which had been terrorized by his actions. Ireland's case became a catalyst for discussions about homophobia and hate crimes. It highlighted the urgent need for societal change, not just in policy, but in everyday attitudes and understanding. Ireland died on February 21, 2012 of pulmonary fibrosis and a fractured hip he had suffered earlier. Former prison governor Vanessa Frake, who had crossed paths with numerous hardened criminals, called Ireland the most frightening prisoner she has ever come across. She said, "I don't know what it was about him. He just emanated evil. He was proud of what he did, same as many other serial killers. What drives a man to commit such calculated and brutal acts of violence?" To understand Ireland's psyche, we delve into the complex labyrinth of his mind, piecing together a profile that is as disturbing as it is intriguing. Experts who have studied Ireland's case point to a combination of factors. His troubled childhood, marked by instability and lack of a father figure, may have sown the seeds of his later behavior, but it was his deep-seated desire for recognition, a craving to leave a mark on the world that propelled him into the abyss of serial killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes suggests a high level of intelligence and planning. He studied serial killers not with repulsion, but with a scholar's interest. He learned from their mistakes, aiming not just to evade capture, but to master the art of killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes offers a chilling glimpse into the mindset of a serial killer. His need for control and recognition, coupled with his ability to blend into society, challenges our understanding of criminal behavior. Forensic psychologists theorize that Ireland's choice of victims from the gay community was strategic rather than personal. He saw them as easy targets, vulnerable due to societal marginalization. This choice reflects not just a cold-blooded strategy, but a chilling indifference to human life. He said about how he chose his victims, "Think it's been something that's been triggered in me some time before. I felt if I was approached, it was likely that I would kill. I thought to myself, if I wasn't approached, something wouldn't have happened. I would have gone on my way and nothing would have happened." Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks explained, "What he does is he reduces the chance of choosing an inappropriate victim or somebody who wasn't going to respond by not selecting those who didn't approach him." Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Ireland's psychology is his lack of remorse. His confessions were devoid of emotion, his recounting of the crimes clinical. This detachment points to a possible psychopathic personality where empathy and conscience are alarmingly absent. Detective Inspector Martin Finnegan said, "He was very factual about his acts, as if he was describing someone else's activities. Absolutely no compassion at all. I didn't detect much hatred. It was just matter of fact, like I went down the shops and bought this, went into the flat and killed him." In most cases, the murderers who kill gay people are gay themselves, and those blatantly homophobic are often secretly gay. Was it really a plausible excuse for Ireland to give in to his secret emotions? Ireland compared the buzz of his first kill to that of losing his virginity. Maybe these hidden feelings brought this simile to his mind. Was Ireland just dishonest with himself and others, trying to hide what he really couldn't control? Ireland said he was heterosexual and didn't touch or have sex with the men he killed. However, it's difficult to imagine that at least 5 people invited him to his flat for sex, undressed, and let Ireland tie them without even a single kiss. Can a person even decide to become a serial killer as a career just for the sake of it without any ulterior motives? And choose the specifics of his crimes by pure logic? Or is it something deeper? Or was theft the real reason of Ireland's crimes and murdering his victims was a calculated move to prevent them from identifying him later? There's inconsistency in Ireland's story about the murder of Perry Bradley. He said that he had promised Bradley to leave him alive, but then it occurred to him that Bradley could identify him. This narrative strongly contradicts with his whole intention of choosing his victims for murder to gain fame from becoming a serial killer. Was Ireland just exploiting homophobic moods in the society to mask the mercenary nature of his crimes, hoping that it will win him sympathy of the public and reduce the term of his imprisonment? Or was there more than one reason, perhaps all of them combined? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Share your perspectives and let me know what other cases you'd like me to explore. Until next time. On December 8, 1985, Samuel Basil and Patricia Joseph welcomed a baby girl into the world. December 8th is the day of the Roman Catholic feast of the Immaculate Conception, and the baby would be named Immaculate Mary Basil, known to most as Mackie. Mackie was one of 7, having 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and was from the Tlossan Nation, British Columbia, based out of Tatchee, south of the Coosche River. The village of Tatchee, inhabited by roughly 400 people, has 1 road going in and 1 road coming out. Patricia Joseph had attended a residential school that was church-run and government-mandated. Children in these schools were stripped of their cultures, traditions, and taken away from their families. The last residential school closed in Canada in 1996, and the effects of them are still being felt by many to this day. In her earliest years, Mackie's life was stable. This changed when her father had an affair with another woman and left the family. Peter, Mackie's brother, explained that following their father's departure, their mother turned to alcohol and, in his words, kind of just left us behind. Peter began to care for his younger siblings, but before long, the children would be placed in foster care. The 3 youngest girls, 4-year-old Crystal, 5-year-old Mackie, and 6-year-old Ida, bounced around group homes and different foster homes, with mostly non-Indigenous carers. When they were first taken into care, Mackie, Ida, and Crystal were initially kept together. Crystal talked about their experiences, saying that the foster parents would just treat us wrong, being in it for the money. If the children got wet from playing outside, then the foster parents would strip them down in public. At some point, Mackie was placed in a separate home, but they would still see each other at school. Due to her thick carrier accent and the outdated outfits the foster carers insisted on putting the children in, they were often targeted by bullies. Mackie and Ida would endure appalling physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. They would bear the brunt of it to protect their younger sister, Crystal. Crystal said, "All that time they were getting sexually abused by our foster parents to save me." Ida said that Mackie got the most of it. As they got older, they were placed in group homes together, staying in hotel rooms for weeks at a time when a place couldn't be found for them. They would save their allowances and use the money to buy bus tickets or would hitchhike back to the reserve to see Peter, who at that point was too old to be in the foster care system. "Because we didn't get to grow up in an indigenous home. Mackie always said she wanted to go back home and get to know our family and get to know the community," Ida said. Ida would later say that their shared experience of the foster care system strengthened their bond, and they would make time to call each other regularly at 10 a.m. In the early 2000s, Mackie aged out of the foster care system and graduated from high school. She also remained faithful to her dream of reconnecting with her roots, her heritage, and her people. Mackie settled in Fort St. James and was working 2 jobs, part-time as a secretary and also as a teaching assistant. In 2006, tragedy would strike when Patricia Joseph was struck by a vehicle in Prince George. She would later die as a result of her injuries. One of the most important aspects of Mackie's life was being a mother to her little boy Jameson. Her world revolved around him, and she was a dedicated and devoted parent. Mackie adored children and became a foster parent to someone on the reserve. She was determined that children who went into the foster care system would not have the same experiences that she had had, and that the children she cared for would be treated with the dignity and respect that she had been so cruelly denied. Mackie was shy and introverted and highly selective about who she chose to spend her time with. Whilst she struggled, she rarely showed it, determined to overcome her past and not let it define her. She didn't drink or do drugs and rarely went to parties or anything of the sort. She preferred to spend her time at home. Any events that came up, Mackie would channel her creative energy and decorate the whole room. Mackie had recently split from her longtime partner, who was the father of her little boy. It is not public knowledge how long they had been together, and the cause of the breakup is also not known. What we do know is that news of their separation had come as a surprise to Mackie's family. In the week leading up to Father's Day, Mackie was with her brother Peter at his home in Tachi. Following the split with her partner, she would stay there on and off and would keep a bag of clothes in the closet. She seemed troubled, but he didn't think much of it. Whilst they were making coffee, Mackie twice said to him, "Promise me you'll take care of my baby." He responded, "Should I be worried? Are you coming back?" "I'll be back," Mackie promised. A few days later, Mackie, Peter, and Peter's wife Vivian went to purchase a cake for Father's Day. As Mackie had lost her ID, Peter purchased 2 bottles of vodka for a party that she would be attending later that night. Before she headed out, she grabbed her iPod and headphones. Mackie never went anywhere without her music, and promised she would be back the next day as she had plans to take her nephew and son to the park. She returned a few hours later to retrieve the second bottle of vodka before heading up the trail that led out of town. Peter opened the front door and his sister called back, "Goodbye, bro. I love you." As Peter watched her walk away, he noticed a man waiting for her further up the trail. Peter later explained in an interview with the Waries, he had asked himself why Mackie would say goodbye in that way if she knew she would be coming home. On the 13th of June, 2013 at 5 p.m., she attended the funeral of her aunt. Later on, she went to the house party on the Tachi Reserve about 20 minutes away from where she lived. It is not public knowledge how many people were at the party or who exactly was there, but Vanessa Joseph, Mackie's cousin, believes that it was mostly Mackie's cousins who were attending the party. At around midnight, she was seen by Hebra, the Peter, while she was picking up alcohol and told him she was with her younger cousin Keith and a man named Victor, who was known to Vanessa. Victor was around 48 years old at the time and was known to police and had appeared in the Delate court for his crimes. His convictions included violent crime and at least 1 sexual assault. And usually for her, she didn't have an extra change of clothes or makeup as she normally would for an overnight trip. She also did not own a mobile phone. It was reported that she was wearing a black hoodie with a maple leaf on the front, gray yoga bottoms, and white shoes. She also had her dark blue iPod Shuffle with her and her white headphones. It is then alleged that Mackie left the party to get some red tin from a hunter's cabin near Koosje. The truck that she was traveling in allegedly got into an accident as they were coming away from the cabin on Leo Creek Forest Service Road near a place called 16 Kilometers. It has been alleged that following the accident she had attempted to hitchhike herself, but this claim has not been substantiated nor corroborated. Vanessa would later say that an accident was apparent as parts of the truck were found near a tree that had been broken in half. She also explained that she had learned that an attempt had been made to get another truck from the hunter's cabin and use that to pull the truck that had crashed. Large portions of the timeline surrounding Mackie's last known movements have not been made public knowledge. We do know that she was alone for much of the night after midnight. From there, no one knows what happened, said Ida. It is also worth noting that around this time Mackie was not driving a vehicle. As 10 a.m. rolled around, Mackie was due to have her daily call with her sisters Crystal and Ida, but she failed to answer the phone. Her sisters thought that maybe she was at her brother Nick's house, but there wasn't a phone at his property and they lived too far from him to go and have a look around. Also at 10 a.m., Victor was spotted walking down a street in Tachi. Noticeably, his clothes were wet up to his chest. He was seen by Vanessa and others. Although at the time they thought it was strange, they weren't aware that Mackie hadn't been seen, so did not investigate further. After learning that the truck Victor had been driving had been involved in an accident the night before, Vanessa said she thought it was odd that Victor would be on foot in town so soon after it allegedly happened. The truck from the cabin had not been driven back to Tachi, but was instead left on Leo Creek Forest Service Road. No report of the crash was ever filed. When Mackie failed to come home, Ida and Crystal decided to call around those who knew her to see if anyone had seen or heard from her. As time continued to tick by, the next day they discovered she wasn't at her brother Nick's. Mackie had no history of running away and this behavior was completely out of character for her. According to a report in the Walrus, Victor and Keith told Vivian that Mackie had caught a ride with somebody else. Immaculate Basil had seemingly vanished. She went missing from Highway 16. Part of that protracted highway, 724 kilometers of it, is more commonly known as the Highway of Tears Corridor. Countless women, mostly indigenous, have vanished from the Highway of Tears or been murdered near it. This was also not the first tragedy of a missing person to strike the family. Mackie's cousin Bonnie Joseph went missing from the Highway of Tears in 2007. She was last seen by her cousin Joan hitchhiking from Vanderhoof to Prince George. The numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada is an area of confusion. A 2014 report by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, known as Mounties, said that 1,017 Indigenous women had been murdered between 1980 and 2012, and another 164 were considered missing. However, advocacy groups, including the Native Women's Association of Canada, say that the figure is much higher. In 2014, on the question of a public inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, the then Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, said, "It isn't really high on our radar, to be honest." After still no sign of her, on the 17th of June, a missing persons report was filed with the Mounties. The following day, they met with Crystal for the first time regarding her sister, and they began to interview people that had been at the party with Mackie to try and ascertain a timeline and start theorizing as to what could have happened to her. The community set up a search camp near the bridge where Mackie had last been seen. Around 300 people, including those from neighboring reserves, mobilized and joined the hunt to find her. The Mounties received a tip that Mackie had been sighted on the morning of the 14th of June, with the report saying that she had been attempting to hitchhike. The Mounties did investigate these claims, but ultimately determined that the report was false. One problem in coordinating information was caused by her being a resident of one reserve and going missing on another. While they both lay within the Tlaston Nation, they are different jurisdictions. According to the Mounties report, Victor and Keith stated that they had been traveling in a white truck with Mackie after they had left the party. Keith and Victor both told the Mounties that following the accident Mackie had separated from them, and press releases from the Mounties also indicated that she had split from the pair shortly after the truck had crashed and become stuck. As part of the investigation, Both Victor and Keith were given polygraph tests, and the Mounties reported to Mackey's family that both men had cooperated. Keith and Victor were also interviewed by a forensic psychologist, and in their report to the family, they noted that they had found nothing suspicious after conducting their interviews. It wasn't until after the police interviews on the 18th of June had been concluded that the family learned from the investigating Mounties that Mackey had left the party with Victor and Keith. Mackey's relatives have stated that in the first year after her going missing, they didn't hear much from the Mounties regarding her disappearance and case. For around a week after June 18, 2013, the Mounties launched a search effort to try and find her. A hailstorm and rain on the weekend of the 22nd caused problems for the search teams. Various search and rescue organizations, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Air Services, search dogs, and the friends and family of Mackey were all out looking for her. The search area was approximately 20 kilometers surrounding Tatchee and Cutchee. On the 25th of June, it was reported by Ralph Pierre, chief of the Tlaistim First Nation, that the search area would be extended and they would also begin a search of the Tatchee River. Four-wheelers and ground crews continue to search up to half a kilometer into the bush. You know the emotions are running high in the community. A lot of people are tired, but yet their adrenaline kicks in and everybody just keeps going and going and going, Pierre said. Following Mackey going missing, numerous billboards were erected to bring attention to her case. Posters were put up and newspapers ran articles to try and generate any new leads. The official search for Immaculate Basil was called off in October. Despite this, her friends and family continued to scour the area and conduct their own searches. Rumors began to circulate about who could be responsible for Mackey's disappearance, and during a search, Peter and Vivian woke up to find a hole had been slashed in their tent. Locals in town told the family that the truck she had a ride in that night had been found washed out with bleach, but the Mounties said that the police had taken possession of the vehicle and had found no such evidence to back up the claim. They also spoke to her ex-partner and said that he had had an alibi, but it was also alleged that he had ducked out of town. When being interviewed by Annie Hilton for the war rest, the RCMP said they had thoroughly investigated every lead, but as there is no crime scene, nobody can technically be considered a suspect. On the 10th of October 2013, Vanessa Joseph held a walk for her cousin to bring more attention to her case. Before leaving for the walk, Vanessa and others gathered in the Spirit Square with singing and drumming. Children from the Eugene Joseph Elementary School also attended and held signs bringing an awareness to violence against women and also for Mackey. On the third year of Mackey's disappearance, the Tla's Dern Nation offered a reward of $20,000 for any information that could lead to them finding Mackey after her older brother Paul made the request. Despite this, there have still been no major breaks in the case. Her sister Ida said that 3 years after Mackey disappeared, all she heard was rumors. Despite the initial response of the police and them sending out a search and rescue team right away for her. Despite the rumor mill, Ida stated she wanted to know that the police were investigating any possible leads. She also said she was no longer hearing from the police regarding her sister's case and that she hadn't been contacted by them since the year she went missing. There are several theories about what could have happened to Immaculate Basil. As she had a young son and was close to her family, it is considered she unlikely would have upped and left or ran away. RCMP Corporal Dave Tireman spoke to the Canadian news website My Prince George Now about the investigation into Mackey's disappearance. He noted her dedication to her little boy. It would be totally out of character for her to do something like that. Corporal Tireman also stated, "We would be remiss if we didn't think about foul play, so that's being considered. Was she attacked by a wild animal? Was it a part of the terrain? Did she step off a cliff?" Other explanations for her disappearance have been considered, including her being involved in an accident. However, had she been involved in an accident, it would be reasonable to presume that she would have been on foot, meaning that had she died by misadventure, it would have been well within the search radius, but no trace of her was found. None of the items that Mackey had with her that night, such as her clothes or iPod, have ever been found. Another theory was that she had been attacked by an animal. Animals in the area include wolves, cougars, grizzly and black bears, and coyotes. This theory is called into question when one considers that no such evidence of an attack was found by those searching on foot and from the air. No blood or remains have ever been found that are confirmed to be hers. The likelihood of it being a stranger abduction could be considered small due to the remote location of the area and the timing. However, the FBI have stated that abductions committed by a stranger most likely involve a firearm and are motivated by sexual assault. Mackie's family is still looking for her and have never stopped. They regularly watch crime shows on Investigation Discovery to try and gain any ideas for leads. They will continue to search for her until she is found. The only thing I would like to honor my sister is for the people who did it to come forward and give her back to us, Peter said. It's tearing my family apart. Right now it feels like you're a lost soul yourself, just wandering this world, and deep down in your heart, sometimes you do get to the breaking point, where sometimes you just want to take things into your own hands and deal with it your own way. But you can't, you just gotta keep on trying to find answers. This here story is about 26-year-old Elle Edwards. On Christmas Eve 2022, she was celebrating with her friends in a pub in Alley Village, Liverpool, UK. The gal was real vibrant and beautiful. She worked as a cosmetologist in a local beauty salon and was also an assistant to a dermatologist. Elle was naturally positive and mighty kind, which allowed her to win over even the most demanding clients. Elle was pretty and had become an excellent specialist in her fields. The gal was cheerful and always smilin', but at the same time, she remained determined, constantly moving towards her goals and dreams. On December 24th, G22, her sister Lucy flew in from Dubai to spend the holidays with the family, and Elle eagerly awaited her return. They decided to celebrate this long-awaited event in style. So the girls and their friends headed to the local pub. Here they had a great time, laughing a lot, dancing and singing karaoke. In the merry atmosphere, no one noticed that a person Ta, whom kindness was alien, was nearby. Around 11:50 p.m., an emergency call came in. As they were exiling the pub, no less than 12 shots were fired, and 2 of them hit Elle. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head that proved to be mighty serious. The dispatcher directed emergency services to the same. They urgent-like arrived at the pub, loaded the gal into an ambulance, and took her to the local hospital. However, she died on the way, as her injuries was incompatible with life. When the police informed the victim's family about the tragedy, there was in a state of shock. No one believed it, and no one understood how this could have happened to her. No one suspected that this beautiful and cheerful girl could have had deadly enemies. In the early stages of the investigation, the detectives had no leads. The assailant had attacked unexpected-like and disappeared Chasters mysteriously, leaving only a shelled casein and the bleeding victim at the crime scene. The attack was sudden but well-planned and gave Elle no chance of survival. But was the gal the true target of the attack, or did she become a random victim of a madman? An unknown car stopped near the pub entrance, and minutes later the shooting started. In addition to the deceased, 4 other men received gunshot wounds of varying severity, all of them young people aged 22 to 33 who was spending the evening in the establishment and lived in the nearby towns. Initially, police were inclined to believe that the murdered woman was a random victim. It was known that criminal gangs were operating in the area periodically. The shooting was likely to routine showdown between their members. However, all of this was just conjecture, which would have to be proven or disproved in the course of the investigation. So the detectives delved deeper into the victim's personality, like the witnesses to the crime. The victim's relatives were at a loss as to who could have wanted Elle's death, as the girls seemed to have no ill wishes or enemies capable of such horrors. The detectives decided to interview other witnesses and the victims of the unknown criminal's gunfire. In addition, law enforcement officers requested the pub owner's video surveillance recordings. It would be necessary to talk to dozens of people and analyze several hours of video recordings. Several police officers were working on the extensive investigation. It was necessary to answer several difficult questions. There were too many victims of the attack. But was this spontaneous aggression, or did the perpetrator pursue a specific target? All witnesses to the incident were interrogated. However, checking mobile communications data took more time. The media were notified to assist in the investigation. Law enforcement officers urged anyone with valuable information to come to the police station. First and foremost, this concerned possible video recordings made by random eyewitnesses, on any of which the car in which the aggressor arrived might appear. After the crime, the police held a meeting with local residents. The purpose of this communication was to persuade people possessing valuable information to share it with law enforcement officers. It was assumed that someone might have seen the moment of the attack or know the criminal. People were urged not to be afraid of the criminals and the local feuding clans. Community leaders supported local residents during this difficult time. In addition to the conversations, activists went door to door and communicated with the neighbors. Special trained officers worked with the family of the deceased. They gall-beamed to provide them with support in connection with the heavy loss. In the course of this work, it was established that the perpetrator had left the pub parking lot in a dark-colored car. Eyewitness accounts regarding it may differed. It was dark and it was difficult to make out anything, but the most likely was a dark Mercedes-Benz class. Later, this was confirmed after checking the outdoor surveillance cameras. The killer did not immediately open fire, drive up to the parking lot, and observe the pub visitors for some time. He sat in the car so that he could freely see the entrance and most of what was happening inside. Apparently, he was choosing the most convenient moment for the attack. After a few minutes of surveillance, when Al came out, the criminal quickly got out of the car, fired 12 shots, then instantly got back behind the wheel and disappeared. Investigators, after studying the recordings, made an important conclusion. The attacker was a lion. No one helped him. It was not possible to trace the exact location where the perpetrator fled. Therefore, the detectives went door to all local residents, describing the car and recounting the circumstances of the incident, trying to establish the identity of the killer. Patrolling the streets was carried out around the clock, and this yielded results. Just 2 days after the shooting, detectives detained 2 suspects, but no names were mentioned until all the circumstances were clarified. However, it was not possible to prove their involvement in the crime, in particular because the murder weapon was not found. After that, the detectives made a statement to the public, saying that they would not rest until the unknown shooter was punished. All this was intended to calm the local residents, who were outraged by the rampant crime and the powerlessness of the authorities. It was also assumed that the attack had been provoked by a feud between local gangs. In this case, L would be considered a random victim. However, all this was also just an assumption that remained to be verified. In the course of the investigation, it was possible to establish that the potential targets could have been Jake Dudley and Kiram Seld, members of the local Beechwood gang, who was spending the evening in the pub. It became known that they had been in long-term, fierce conflict with another group claiming this territory. On December 29th, the police arrested another person, but he was not the one who opened fire. The suspect had a solid alibi that excluded him from the list of suspects. However, the detective suspected that he had participated in the setup for the attack. Around the same time, the dark Mercedes car in which the killer had left the pub parking lot was identified. But due to the lack of direct evidence, the name of the third suspect was also not disclosed. There were some difficulties with the found car. The car was traced through video surveillance systems and identified thanks to the cameras. But law enforcement officers were too late. On December 31st, the police department received the report that the fire had started near the scene of the shooting. When the special services arrived at the scene, they found a darkness fading similar to the perpetrator's vehicle, which was engulfed in flames. The vehicle was completely burned out. Valuable evidence was lost in the flames. The perpetrators clearly knew that the police were on their trail, so they decided to destroy one of the direct pieces of evidence, despite the fact that the fire did not completely destroy the car. It was confirmed that it had been used during the shooting. However, the Mercedes did not belong to the perpetrators, but had been stolen shortly before the attack. Presumably, the arson was committed intentionally to complicate the investigation after the murder of competitors. On January 11th, 2 more suspects, a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman, were delivered to the police department. They were arrested in Central Wales. The man's name was Connor Chapman. He was well known to the police. He had an extensive criminal record that he had accumulated over the past 5 years before the murder of El Adwiza. Connor had started with daring lawbreakings and gradually sank deeper into the abyss of crime. One of his first serious crimes was a car theft under aggravating circumstances. He had repeatedly become a suspect in robberies, hooliganism, and threatening behavior. Once the young man was involved in a chase with the police, after which he abandoned the car and hid in the bushes nearby. When they detained him, the criminal said that he did not understand what chase they were talking about and that he was here just waiting for a friend. In this case, he became the real star. The detainee's data ended up in newspaper headlines. Carla Chapman was from Birkenhead, Liverpool. His parents had left him at an early age, so his grandparents had formalized guardianship. It was in a house that the hero of the story moved. The teenager dropped out of high school shortly before the exams. In general, he studied poorly and no special hopes were pinned on him. He was always considered a problem child. The young hooligan first became a defendant in a court case in 2014, when he was 14 years old. Connor was accused of shoplifting. As early as 2016, he committed another crime. His involvement in the theft of a car was proven when the young man was detained in a stolen vehicle. He did not have a driver's license or insurance, which was a violation of the terms of his suspended sentence. In 2017, high theft was added to the storage of prohibited substances. During this period, he was also under police supervision, so he had again violated the restraining order. As a result, he was banned from accessing several parts of the city. Connor was not allowed to appear in public places, as he clearly posed a threat to society. However, as early as 2019, he violated the ban again. The patrol detained him in a public place. The young man had a knife and prohibited substances with him. In the same year, the general public first heard about Connor Chapman. He appeared on the pages of the local newspaper after an unsuccessful attempt to escape from the police in a stolen car. The city patrol noticed the stolen Audi on the streets and ordered the driver to stop and get out of the car with his hands up. However, the 18-year-old Chapman did not obey, provoking a chase. During the short flight, Connor committed a large number of traffic violations. In particular, he accelerated to more than 80 kilometers per hour in areas with a 30 kilometers limit. Tana repeatedly drove into oncoming traffic and in the end crashed into the curb. At speed, Kai was thrown aside and turned around. The driver could not continue the orgy, so he got out of the car and ran away. However, even here he was unlucky, as the patrol caught up with him in the bushes just a few hundred meters away. In his defense, the young man said that he was waiting here for a friend, but the deception was obvious. The lawyer of Connor explained in court that his client had fallen under the influence of a band company of Alder Freys. The court left him unpunished and the need to release the budding criminal. He was found to have attention deficit disorder and a number of other disorders identified by private specialists during the trial. Despite this, due to numerous violations and potentially dangerous behavior on the road, he was sentenced to a term of up to 8 months in prison for 2 monies. The young man also received a ban on driving a car, which was in effect after his release. Thus, the budding criminal had achieved 14 convictions for 30 criminal episodes by the time he reached adulthood. It was obvious that he had no intention of changing and categorically refused to fit into society. Everyone understood that he was potentially dangerous, but legal grounds for isolating him from society had not been found. This was due to the fact that so far no person had been seriously injured by his inadequate behavior. The public was outraged by the powerlessness of the authorities. Everything was shaping up so that the criminal elements could do nothing until they kill or maim innocent people. And that's how it turned out. In January 2020, the court again sentenced Connor Chapman, this time to 10 months in prison. He was again caught in a public place with a cold weapon and substances in his pocket, a whole bouquet of prohibitive lists. During this period, the police openly appeared on TV channels, urging the public to beware of this young man. After serving his sentence, protected months, he again got involved in crime and was wanted for at least 5 criminal episodes. When he was caught, the young criminal said that he had spent more time behind bars than free, and he did not seem upset about this, but rather proud of his achievements. However, Connor had no intention of stopping there. By the age of 20, his service record had expanded again. By this point, he had received 19 sentences for 43 crimes. But in the summer of 2022, the inadequate young man found himself free again. This happened just 6 months before the death of L. Edwards. During this period, Connor was again brought before the court. His lawyer tried to play on pity, telling the story that the first child of the young man was born while he was in prison. At this point, his girlfriend was pregnant with a girl. The young man claimed that he had rethought his life and wanted to get on the path of correction. Of course, these were loud, false words. The only thing he wanted was to get free and return to the path of crime. During this period, the police already knew that he was a member of one of the local criminal gangs engaged in the sale of prohibited substances. However, the criminal was tried not for these serious crimes, but for burglary and theft of 2 electric motorcycles. On December 24th, 322, a skirmish broke out between 2 rival criminal gangs. They began to argue over the division of the territory near the wooden church in Beechwood Estates. They failed to reach an agreement, after which the young gangster decided to take revenge. He armed himself with a submachine gun and waited for about 3 hours until he tracked down his targets. He wanted to kill Karen Seld and Jake Duffy, who had gone to the Moyak pub for rest. Shortly before midnight, the criminal drove up to the parking lot and began to observe. He identified his victims and waited for the right moment to attack, then ran out of a car and fired 12 bullets into the building. He managed to seriously injure Duffy, but despite the threat to his life, he survived the attack. However, the unlucky L. Edwards, who was not so fortunate, 2 bullets hit her in the head. The young beauty fought for her life, but died in the arms of the medics on the way to the hospital. The girl accidentally met the killer's targets that evening, and did not even suspect that the festive revelry could end so tragically. The pub was crowded. Then 1 person was killed and 4 were wounded. One 22-year-old man was shot in the leg. A 24-year-old young man was wounded in the arm, and a 33-year-old man in the wrist. None of these injuries were life-threatening. Elle's friends tried to provide her with assistance and perform artificial respiration right on the spot. However, this was not enough to save her life. Elle's sister, Lucy, was much like you. She lived in Dubai and flew home to celebrate Christmas with her family. Just minutes before the attack, she had left the establishment, so she was not affected at all. Later, Lucy recalled how she had wanted to take her sister with her, but the girl wanted to stay with her friends. On January 25, 2023, the funeral of the young girl took place. Hundreds of concerned people came to say goodbye to the random victim of gang showdowns. The body was brought to the local church in a hearse drawn by 4 white horses. Even the pub that had become the site of the girl's last celebration was closed that day as a mark of respect for her memory. The owner of the establishment published a message of support for Hell's family on his official social media page. Connor Chapman was charged with a whole list of charges, the main one of which was murder. It became known that the perpetrator had an accomplice, namely the 20-year-old Thomas. After the arrest and during the searches, a video recording was found on this young man, which had been made shortly before the attack. In it, Connor is handing over a weapon and saying that he is going to settle accounts with someone. After the attack, they together hid the stolen Mercedes in order to get rid of it later. The murder weapon was never found. However, the killer's DNA traces were found on one of the shell casings fired. It was obvious that it was Connor who loaded the weapon before the attack. In addition, red gloves were found during searches in his house, which were clearly visible in the CCTV footage from morning. After the crime, when the perpetrators had abandoned the car, they ordered a taxi under a false name. They used the driver's services to cover their tracks and confused the investigation. Around 5 a.m., they returned to the place where the hidden car was located. Here, the criminals tried to cover their tracks. However, something went wrong. Ultimately, they decided to get rid of the car by setting it on fire. Thomas Nord was found guilty on all charges brought against him. In July 2023, the court sentenced him to 9 years in prison. This modest sentence was due to the fact that he had not yet managed to accumulate such a wide criminal history as his accomplice. Jake and Karen were wounded in the moment of the attack, but both managed to survive the assault. A look at their lifestyle made the aggression of one of the members of the rival gangs quite understandable. Both were members of the local Beechwood gang, which was openly in conflict with another group claiming this territory. It became known that on December 23rd, just a day before the attack with firearms, they had already been attacked. On that occasion, another person from Connor Chapman's group had assaulted them. Both were beaten, but did not receive serious injuries. Apparently, they considered this a random fight and calmly went to relax in the pub. While the shooter awaited his sentence in the case of the murder of the innocent victim, both targets of his attack were already in prison. Curran was sentenced to 27 months in prison for an attack on members of the rival criminal group. Another 9 months were added to the sentence for the fight. His friend was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months for a similar offense. Obviously, they were trying to avenge the attempted murder. Prohibitive court orders were also issued against both of them with a whole list of restrictions. Of course, this method did not allow protecting citizens from this gang of criminals. However, in case of further violations, more severe punishment could be applied to them due to ignoring the prescriptions. The public was outraged that potentially dangerous members of criminal gangs were getting away with minimum sentences after each crime. The bans were clearly ineffective and did not contribute absolutely anything to public safety. This became especially obvious when it was found that Chapman already had a ban on visiting that region where the pub was located. But this did not prevent him from stealing a car and coming to the public place, despite the fact that he also had a driving ban. The events that had occurred once again raised the question of toughening punishments and revising the existing norms of the legal system. However, so far this flawed system has not suffered any serious changes. At the trial on the case of L's murder, Connor tried to refute that it was he who appeared on the CCTV footage. According to him, during this period he was at home, packing Christmas gifts. However, a sufficient amount of evidence was collected to expose the lie. The hearings on the case lasted 3.5 weeks, during which all the circumstances preceding the attack were revealed. It became known that the reason for the attack was only the competition between the two criminal gangs dividing the territory nearby. The defendant did not even know the victim. He simply did not care about her fate, as well as the fate of all the other innocent people in the bar. He was driven only by blind fury, which he could never control. After the attempted murder of two competitors, Connor planned to flee to Spain to cover his tracks. He used a stolen car and also got rid of the murder weapon, trying not to fall into the hands of the police. He avoided using any mode of transport. The detectives detained the criminal literally at the airport. After the arrest, Connor tried to deceive the police, claiming that the Mercedes he was seen driving on the day of the murder was not stolen. According to him, this was a common car of the criminal group, which they used for the distribution of substances. The guy claimed that he was not behind the wheel of the vehicle and also continued to convince the jury that he did not open fire that evening. He was desperately trying to get out of the situation. The defendant stated that he had only just learned that someone from the criminal group had used the vehicle for an attack on the pub. Before the jury retired to consider the verdict, the father of the innocent victim made a short speech. He sincerely hoped that the criminal would never again be able to spend Christmas with his loved ones in freedom. The jurors, consisting of Pitiation and Singention, came to a unanimous decision after 3 hours of discussion. In their opinion, Connor Chapman was guilty of all the charges brought against him. He cynically committed the crime and did not repent of the fact that he accidentally killed the beautiful 26-year-old girl. The whole life that lay ahead of her, and he took it away. Instead of remorse, the heartless Connor spent several days carefully getting rid of all the evidence and traces of the murder that could link him to this bloody event. The motive for the attack was the competition between criminal gangs. On July 7, 2023, Connor was sentenced. He was sent to serve a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 48 years from the start of serving the sentence. After the verdict was announced, the victim's father victoriously raised his fist. The incident provoked a wave of public outrage. The residents of the city could not feel safe, knowing that they were at the junction of the confrontation between criminal gangs dividing spheres of influence. They knew that these people had a large amount of firearms and were not afraid to use them, as proved by the murder of L. The girl's father said he wanted to set up a foundation to support victims like his daughter. He believed that the main goal would be to fight to reduce the number of weapons in the hands of civilians. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.